Recently, it's been confirmed that the Nintendo Switch Lite will release this fall. This is what many people sort of speculated to be the Switch Mini in a sense, considering that this is portable only and will not be able to connect to the TV, Joy-Cons will not be detachable, and there are some other restraints for this Switch Lite. One thing that I've noticed is improved about the Switch Lite is how they have better battery, which I just assume is because of all the other stuff that they're cutting back on. So that part of it's nice, but the rest of the console is relatively inferior to the original Nintendo Switch, which is intended because this is a cheaper console for people to buy. This is sort of a way for non-Nintendo fans to get more interested into the Nintendo games and products at a cheaper price point without having to go with a full $300 US price tag for the regular Nintendo Switch, and now they can go with this $200 console instead. But with this Switch Lite being revealed, there have been many more questions that fans have been wondering about concerning something else that was tied to it in many rumors. This being a Switch Pro. In multiple rumors before the Nintendo Switch Lite was revealed, when we mostly refer to it as the Switch Mini, a Nintendo Switch Pro was also slated to be releasing. Some said it was going to be coming out this year, while other sources claimed that it would be released sometime in the future. With these big Nintendo rumors, there's obviously lots of conflicting sources, but there were many of them stating that a Switch Pro would be releasing. Recently, we've had Doug Bowser, president of Nintendo America, coming out and saying other than the Switch Lite, there will be no new Switch hardware this year. This deconfirms those possibilities of a Switch Pro. The Switch Pro has been deconfirmed for 2019. But what about in general? Is an improved version of the Nintendo Switch really necessary for Nintendo to release? And if so, when will it be releasing? Those are the questions that I'm going to be trying to answer within this video. And with that being said, let's get started. First things first, I'd like to touch on the original rumors that I was alluding to earlier about the Switch Mini possibly being linked to a Switch Pro. Now, if you take that original rumor and just think about it for a second, the fact that Nintendo would decide not to talk about either of these hardware at their E3 presentation is kind of interesting. It shows me that either they just want to focus a lot on keeping their E3 presentation concise and game focused, or it shows me that they didn't really want to push the Switch Lite that much. After all, there was really no build-up. Nintendo just sort of dropped a video showcasing what the Switch Mini would be, and an idea of when it'll be releasing. But you'd think for a Switch Pro, Nintendo would want a lot more focus on it because it's like an improved version of the console. You kind of understand Nintendo's hesitance to showcase the Switch Mini a lot because it's more of a downgrade. But for an upgrade, you're really going to want to push this. This is likely because the Switch Lite probably isn't going to be having a lot of exclusive software dedicated to it, whereas a Switch Pro would likely have some exclusive software. This is similar to the new 3DS, which released a few years after the original 3DS did as an improved version of the console, and it had some exclusive content for it. While many would argue that it didn't have nearly enough exclusive content to satisfy a separate purchase for a new 3DS, it did have the Xenoblade Chronicles remake, as well as SNES games available on it. And having SNES games available on the new 3DS, I guess, is still an improvement over the Nintendo Switch. But that was pretty much the exclusive content on the new 3DS, and you think Nintendo would want to take some of that criticism to heart and put more exclusive content out there for a Switch Pro. As I'm going to get into in a little bit, maybe Nintendo won't necessarily have as much of a choice on whether or not they're going to want to make some of this content exclusive. But getting back to the 3DS a little bit, I think one of the main reasons why Nintendo didn't provide a lot of exclusive content for the new 3DS is because there were a lot of original 3DS systems sold. And if you're going to release a new big game like Pokemon, for example, they're going to want as many people to go out and buy that as possible. And many of those people don't want to go out and buy an upgraded version of the 3DS, they just want to stick with the original version that they've had since 2011. This causes a big problem for Pokemon, because if you played a 7th generation Pokemon game, you realize that the games do not run very well on original 3DS systems. Having played the game on my new 3DS, it does run a little bit better. It's not perfect, but at least it runs a lot better than on the original 3DS. This might have been a game that in theory would make sense to make new 3DS exclusive, but because of how few people own a new 3DS as compared to the original 3DS's system base, it doesn't really make financial sense for Pokemon to go and do that. You could also try to look at it from a different perspective. Pokemon is a massive franchise. It's the highest grossing media franchise in the world, and one of Nintendo's highest selling video game franchises. You can look at it from the perspective saying that, alright, if we make Pokemon a new 3DS exclusive, we're going to get a lot of people to go out and buy the new 3DS. But the problem is, Pokemon's a little bit separate from Nintendo in that Nintendo doesn't have full ownership over the brand. It's also split between Game Freak and Creatures Incorporated, which means that Pokemon is probably going to be more hesitant to try to make a choice like this to benefit Nintendo more than themselves. While Nintendo, on the other hand, has more control over Mario and can decide whether or not they want to make a new 3D Mario game entirely exclusive to a new console, Pokemon is not like that. If Game Freak and Creatures decide against something that Nintendo is really rooting for, Nintendo's probably going to be upset with it, but ultimately the Pokemon Company gets to make that decision. And a decision that more so benefits the Pokemon Company than the rest of Nintendo would be putting a Pokemon game available on the original 3DS system so that they could get more sales for that game and make more money. But how does this relate to the Nintendo Switch and the possibility of a Nintendo Switch Pro? Well, if you look at the graphics available on the Nintendo Switch and on the Nintendo Switch Lite compared to the competing consoles out there on the market, the Nintendo Switch does not have the graphical capabilities of the Xbox One or the PS4 or their upgraded versions, definitely. This means that Nintendo, when they released the Switch, right from that point, was behind those other two companies who they're competing with. Yes, they're going to come out and tell you publicly that they're not competition, but they are. Those are the only major companies that publish video game consoles, so it's very important for Nintendo to try to compete against them. They could work with them all they want with their Better Together initiative between Nintendo and Microsoft, but at the end of the day, one company is going to try to get more console sales than the other. So with this competition factor existing, Nintendo's likely going to want better graphical capabilities for the Nintendo Switch when Microsoft and PlayStation decide to release their new consoles likely next year. If Nintendo has nothing to release next year, then they're going to be left behind in this department. Two competing companies with brand new consoles out on the market that somebody might go and buy instead of buying a Nintendo Switch that's sitting there on the shelf. And if they're looking for graphics, that's the main thing that they want. They're certainly not going to pick up the Switch Lite, which Nintendo's deciding to release this year. I think the idea for Nintendo to release the Nintendo Switch Lite this year was to get a console out that's more approachable for people who aren't really Nintendo fans but are deciding to get into it for the first time with a lower price point. Then they're going to try to go for more video game fans and some existing Nintendo fans who already own a Switch, with a possible Switch Pro next year. This is what I foresee happening with the Nintendo Switch Pro. I definitely think Nintendo was planning to release one next year in order to try to compete with PlayStation and Microsoft in the graphical department. Now, some of you may point out that right now Nintendo doesn't really care about graphics too much, and it's probably not going to be a big point of focus for them. However, this is a clear area in the console that they're lacking. In terms of first-party support and charm with their games, they're king. They're at the top of that list. But when it comes to graphical capabilities and features that come with the system, they're definitely at the bottom. They're very lacking in that department. And that's where Nintendo Switch Pro could really help them out here. A new console with better graphics, all the features of the Nintendo Switch, plus more that could play all the existing software available on the Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch Lite would definitely be appreciated by fans and will probably get a lot more sales. It might not outsell the existing Nintendo Switch that's already on the market, but even if it does half or something like that, it would still be a success. That's probably still more than the Wii U. I was talking about the new 3DS before, and Nintendo, by sticking with the 3DS brand and the DS brand even before that, they were able to get more sales out of it because of the reputation that they developed for their consoles throughout that time. You wonder why there's so many versions of the 3DS out there? Well, the main reason for that is that people keep on buying it. So Nintendo could try to replicate that philosophy with the Nintendo Switch, releasing new versions, each with their own set of features that makes them unique from one another. The Nintendo Switch Lite has better battery life and is more suited to a portable experience for a gamer on a budget, whereas a possible Nintendo Switch Pro would be more suited to people who want those great home console graphics. These graphics that are lacking in the original console that's already out on the market. The new 3DS appealed to people who wanted something more out of their original 3DS, so they went out to go and buy that upgraded version of the console that Nintendo released. Now, there is a problem with this form of marketing though. Wii U is a big example of this. The Wii U was trying to be a new console, but it looked to the general public as if it was just an upgraded version of the Wii. Including a brand alongside a new console helps, but that's only when you're trying to make it so that it's not as new as an entirely new generation. By releasing a Nintendo Switch Pro, they don't have to create a whole new generation of Nintendo consoles. They could still make this one entirely backwards compatible, just have some exclusive content for it, but mostly new games will release and be compatible with the Nintendo Switch Lite, the regular Nintendo Switch, and now the Switch Pro. The Wii U was backwards compatible with Wii games and used some Wii controllers with it, but it was trying to be an entirely new generation for Nintendo while using the Wii branding. So if Nintendo wants to start an entirely new generation of consoles, well then they gotta ditch the Switch branding. But I think for now, with the Switch being successful, they're going to try to ride the train. And by riding this, they have to create a Switch Pro in order to be updated with the graphical capabilities that the other consoles have been focusing on more. I like that Nintendo doesn't prioritize graphics as much because it means we get more unique things from them compared to the other console companies. However, I would like Nintendo to focus on graphics a little bit more, so we get games looking a bit nicer. Games like Super Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild look incredibly nice. However, they have to have stylized visuals because if they went for an entirely realistic approach, they wouldn't look very good in comparison to a game that uses a realistic graphical style approach on another company's console. Now, there are even some people out there thinking that a Nintendo Switch Pro just generally won't happen because some original rumors for the Switch Mini stated that a Switch Pro was going to be coming, but they also stated that the Switch Mini would be connectable to the TV, which Nintendo has confirmed that it's not. This makes some people believe that the Nintendo Switch Pro is not going to be releasing because that's been proven to be false. The entire thing must be false. Well, it is possible that this entire rumor was false. After all, they did call it the Switch Mini and not the Switch Lite, which it ended up being named. However, the idea of a Switch Pro has been thrown out there by many other sources. I mentioned near the beginning of the video there were so many different rumors of a Switch Pro coming out that something has to be true, right? But also just thinking with common sense and the natural progression where Nintendo seems to have to go, the Switch Pro really makes sense for them. But what kind of content would we get released exclusively for the Switch Pro? Well, I think there would be a lot of third-party content that would have to be exclusive to a Switch Pro, games with great graphics that just aren't available to play on the Nintendo Switch or Switch Lite, but would be able to work with the advanced graphical capabilities of the Switch Pro. It is possible that we get some exclusive first-party content on the Nintendo Switch Pro, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that. Xenoblade Chronicles 3D was a big game, but Xenoblade is kind of a niche franchise. I don't want to say that because it makes it sound bad when I'm really not trying to bash it, but Xenoblade Chronicles just doesn't appeal to everybody. It doesn't have that mass appeal as Mario, Zelda, Pokemon has, for example. Fire Emblem's gaining that ground a little bit, but it's still not quite at that massive level. We might get a game of a franchise of the caliber of Xenoblade exclusive for the Switch Pro, which could be really good for a series like Xenoblade, advancing the graphics there a little bit. But in terms of a Mario or Zelda, man, it really depends on how much Nintendo would want to push this thing. If Nintendo really wants to push the Switch Pro a lot, then they're going to probably try to make a new 3D Mario exclusive for it, because a lot of people are going to go and buy that exclusively on the Switch Pro. However, I feel that if Nintendo was to do something like that, it would alienate a lot of people who have the original Switch and probably piss a lot of them off. Nintendo doesn't really want to piss off its fans because they're getting a lot of new ones who left during the Wii U days. So I think straying away from the massive first-party exclusive content for the Switch Pro would be something nice, at least for the people who just want to stick with their original Switch. I would like some exclusive content for a Switch Pro, but having it be too excessive wouldn't really make too much sense. That could probably be saved for a new console generation for Nintendo. But when would this new console generation probably take place? I assume that this would probably take place around 2022-2023, considering that the track record for Nintendo home consoles tends to be around 5 or 6 years between each new one. The Wii U went from 2012 to 2017, and that 5-year gap was probably just to rush out the Nintendo Switch a little bit, because the Wii U was just not selling well at all. But we could get an extended period of time with the Nintendo Switch if Nintendo decides to release new models like the Switch Pro alongside it to get people more engaged with the system and give them something that they specifically want out of it that they're not getting with the base model. Let me know what you think of the possibility of a Nintendo Switch Pro. I have lots more Nintendo content for you on the channel. I recommend checking out some of the videos that I have linked for you on the screen right now. Remember to subscribe and tick the bell icon if you're new here so that you don't miss any new Nintendo content coming your way very soon. And thank you so much for watching.